Hello, it's Mary Pagano, and I'm the founder of Hera TV. And I have this really brilliant woman that I'm going to have a conversation with today. She's in Portugal right now, and her name is Jacqueline Acevedo. Did I pronounce it right?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
What
So,
an introduction. Thank you.
so this woman has done a lot. I mean, I was very fascinated by looking at, all the things that you've accomplished in your life and a real focus actually on humanity. I was really surprised and I love to see that. I mean, especially going from an educator to a therapist to, family counseling. I was just really, really impressed with what you've accomplished. So one of the first questions I'd like to ask you is, give me a little bit of background on who Jacqui is. Where did you come from and how do you get to where you are now?
Okay, so where do I come from? I identify as a New Yorican. I am Puerto Rican from New York City. My family is typical Puerto Rican family in that about 3 or 4 generations ago, we came from the Canary Islands. So I'm about 70% Spanish Portuguese from the Canary Islands. We mix with the Tainos, and we said that wrong, Indians, and of course, I have African blood because of the black slave trade. So I am,
Wow.
so that's,
Wow.
um,
And tell me a little bit about, some of the career that you've done, some of the work that you've done in the past that brought you to where you are today.
well, the things I tend to focus on are two things. One, I worked with an organization called Conexión. Conexión is a Latino or Latinx executive leadership organization that was actually born in MIT. And what we did was, as a leadership program, it was the most talented Latinos in the Boston area. And their companies or organizations, like whether they were JP Morgan or Boston Children's Hospital or TJX, would pay $8,000 to $10,000 per student, basically, and we would help socialize them. And what did that mean? So that means we would match them with a mentor, and we would also have classes. And if you think about it, and the way I think best way to describe it is, if you're a star finance person in Venezuela, you come to the US and you're at Morgan Stanley. But the corporate culture, not only is the US culture different, but the corporate culture you're now dealing with is so different.
Mhm.
How do you become socialized quickly for success? We already clear you have the talent, but it's a very difficult leap. And unless you've had to make that leap, it's hard to comprehend. So we would really help people, and it's an amazing organization, and MIT was a huge support. From there, I started consulting with Boston NPR at a Boston University. And Boston is a majority minority city, meaning that it's mostly minorities who live in Boston.
Yep.
And the average listener at NPR is a 50-year-old Anglo woman. And they had the insight and the foresight to understand as a majority and minority city, they wanted to look and be the community they were representing. And so what we did was I guess my initiative as a consultant there was to bring Latino audience into NPR. And the reality is the Latino audience I brought in went to the same schools, worked in the same industry. They were no different than the average NPR audience, except they happened to be Latino.
Mm.
And in 18 months, we were, I feel really happy about this. I doubled the Latino audience there.
Wow.
So I'm really all about moving missions forward.
I
And
noticed.
so
That's brilliant.
that's pretty much, and that kind of leads me to what I'm hoping to achieve here.
Yes. So tell me how you got to Portugal and what you're doing now. What's your mission now? What makes your heart sing?
Thank you for asking. I had a very unusual experience. I am actually this week on the cover of the top magazine in Portugal, which is which is an honor and very unusual. And I'm very, what this did, and I had an amazing journalist who was very kind. She wrote the story about how I came to Portugal and why I'm here. In a nutshell, like my friends and family asked, so why are you moving to Portugal? Do you know anybody? Nope. Do you speak Portuguese? Nope. Have you ever been to Portugal before? Nope. So you're selling your home in Boston and going there. Yes. And in the cover of the magazine, it says, I just had a feeling, and that's all I could tell you. I just had a feeling. So I stepped down, and we were here just 2 or 3 months, and we've been under quarantine. So my lens of this country is so narrow because I've been quarantined the whole time practically.
Oh, wow.
So, but what I say in the article is, it has, I know, my experience has been unique and strangely beautiful. And let me explain.
Okay.
What I had the opportunity, I was adopted by people I never would have met. And so, example, the building I lived in, everybody was focused on helping everybody else. I bought an apartment and my neighbor's like, you should live in my apartment for 3 months. Don't pay anything, just enjoy it while I'm traveling. I'm like, what? I mean, the bureaucracy was very difficult during the pandemic. I had people spend hours helping me make phone calls. I think that I must have been probably one of what I say is the pandemic's a global tragedy.
Yeah.
What it did here, in my experience, was bring out the best of humanity. And I think I learned more about the Portuguese people in this year under quarantine than I could have learned in 2 decades of living in this country. Because of the enormous help and support I got trying to negotiate things. So on that level, I think maybe that's why I was in the magazine, because of my particular experience. But really what I was thinking almost from the beginning was how to give back. How do I give back to a country that was so generous that the government decided, even if you were here illegally during the pandemic, you had access to free healthcare.
Wow, that's huge.
Huge. So how do I give back to this country? And I thought about my own experience.
Right.
And if I could share a little bit about that and what kind of a collision. So my own experience is I grew up humbly, like my experience is with my grandmother.
Right.
For example. My grandmother received social services. So I would go with her occasionally while she was online for social services. And you remember those, you don't quite remember, those big chunks of government cheese always seem to be part of social services.
Right.
And we always end up coming home with a big chunk of government cheese. And what was that experience like, on that line? Right. Now, I was a kid, and even somebody who just was kind of unaware, the energy was always helpless, and the energy was frustrating, and people were frustrated and angry, and just the hopeless sense of you're waiting on these long lines that took forever. Now, what made my experience great in my life is I also happened to have a really ambitious mother who was determined single mother who was like, my kids are going to have the best education. They're going to go far. So I was lucky. My mother was like, you're going to Boston College because that's a great college. And you're going to you're going to enjoy culture of New York City, and you're going to go to museums. So it was a humble background with a very ambitious single mother.
Yes. Awesome.
I'm sorry, this is a little bit blank. So shout out to moms, love you, mom, thank you, mom. So I thought food banks, we've seen what's happening in the US. The lines for food banks go on forever.
Right.
And I thought, there are great food banks in this country, right? These food banks in this country are doing tremendous work. But what is the reality of food banks? Okay, so if I could just share with you kind of
Yeah.
brief reality. FIBA, which is the annual forum for the EU on food banks, there's an annual forum. They had uh, a big Zoom meeting about, because they clearly couldn't do it in December. And what did some of the information this organization came out with, and I'd like to share with you just a little bit so that you understand, so people would understand about food banks. And this is probably consistent throughout the Western world, but because I'm in Europe, I'm giving you some information on the EU.
Yeah.
So in '08, an estimated 3.5 as a result of the financial crisis, 13.5 million additional people,
Right.
suffered from food scarcity.
Right.
Now, keep in mind that number, and that the EU does not have a food monitoring system. That was just monitoring food banks.
Wow.
Also keep in mind about food banks is that very few people, they've done studies, in food poverty make use of food banks. So these numbers are grossly underestimated.
Right.
Additionally, because of the pandemic, they're thinking this is going to be a deeper, longer crisis.
Yep.
So there's real issues of food scarcity.
Right.
So my thinking was, okay, lots of organizations are doing amazing things, but even if every organization worked together, we'd be touching a tip of an iceberg.
Right.
So how can I be helpful?
Right.
I am very lucky that I presented an idea to the government, the administration here in Cascais. The mayor is Carlos Garreiras, and his administration. And they are unusual in being really creative thinkers.
Right.
They do things that I have never seen an administration do. And they're so in touch with their constituents. I'll give you an example. If you're you're 88 years old and you're a recent widower, your wife has cooked for you for the last 65 years and she's deceased now, recently deceased. You have no idea how to use a kitchen. What this administration said is, we're going to give you food vouchers to use at restaurants.
Wow.
So they think in some of the most inspirational, creative ways that, I mean, really, I have to say I'm in awe of what this administration does. And I could give you a million examples, but I will stick to what they're supporting me with. So traditionally, if you've seen pictures of these long lines of food banks, well, what are you seeing? You're usually seeing a dismal warehouse. You are seeing, I've worked in food banks in a basement of a Catholic school.
Yep.
You are seeing, just tables outside of people giving food.
Yep.
And I go back to that experience of waiting with my grandmother for some subsidized cheese and seeing that energy in that line.
Yep.
How do we refocus that energy? And so what I'm doing right now is I'm in talks with this administration and sharing an idea, and we're exploring it together. Why not create a community space that happens to be a food bank?
Yep.
Something beautiful. Like, I'm talking to a muralist who's done all these commissions. He's amazing. His name's Tiago Hacke. He actually commissioned him to do a mural in my home. Make it a mural space. Why not have musicians?
Yep.
Why not have people, horticulturists, teaching kids to plant a seed? When this is over, why not have a community space that has tables to have coffee and sustainable cups?
Right.
So that experience brings service dogs that kids can pet, so that when they're waiting for this, we're able to shift. their
Right.
food. And what about the new poverty that's now? People who have never experienced food scarcity are experiencing for the first time.
I know. Crazy.
So what do we want to do for these people? We
Right.
want to create an environment that they that we could restore dignity to those people experiencing food scarcity for the first time.
Right.
And an environment like this would help restore some of the dignity because this is a very difficult time for
Yep.
a lot of people for the first time.
Yep.
So this is really what, I'm in talks now with this administration that we could hope to create. And they've been very supportive of my idea. So, we're going to hopefully move forward very soon.
Wow, that's really awesome. Is there a website for people to go to find out more about it, or is it
We're
still in the works?
starting. This is all conversations we've had in the last few months. I put together a volunteer handbook. They've already got the neighborhood, which is really, again, they really think differently. So the neighborhood they chose was a neighborhood that were the basically low income that's really close to a more middle class income.
Yep.
So that people that have always experienced or are known food scarcity in their past are next to people that are knowing it for the first time. The
Yep.
warehouse is centrally located so people have public transportation.
Yep.
So they've really been helpful. They're gonna be put it on social media and all those kinds of things here.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. I think about when I lived in Manhattan, the thing I used to love to go do was to go to the market in Union Square, where everybody was selling their foods and flowers and just the whole environment, little cafes, sit down and have coffee. I think about that kind of environment in regards to where people don't, you're right, it's the dignity. It's hard to ask for help. And to be in an environment that's kind of, uplifting and, you can put, food, healthy food, into your mouth and, and have a couple of hours of joy with a lot of other people. I think that's a brilliant idea.
Oh,
It's
thank you.
fascinating that that this hasn't shown up, you know what I mean? But you're right. I mean, here in Miami, I mean, we have tents where people drive through and they just pop in food in their trunk, right? It's like a drive-through. And for those people who can't drive, I wonder, how are they getting fed, right? What's working from them? Because sometimes these communities, you might be in a wheelchair. I mean, how are you going to get fed? So I really embrace, but I have to tell you, I mean, I've been to Portugal. I spent 3 months there right before COVID. And I had traveled Europe a lot, but the thing about Portugal, what was so surprising to me was, first of all, the amazing history. You couldn't even see it all in 2 weeks, right? But also, I think it's the people, the culture. I mean, just they're kind. I mean, not only are they kind and smart, but they're spiritual. And so there's a love for humanity that I've noticed in Portugal that I don't always see everywhere. So you're in the right place to do this.
This really means a lot. And I would wholeheartedly agree with that assessment. And it has been my experience. And there have been times where I've been so overcome with other people's generosity. I don't know what to do sometimes with that. And so I'm humbled by it. And when I think also about this, when am I thinking of this space, this kind of, and think how simple it is to transform a warehouse. I mean, it really doesn't cost anything to, you have volunteers, musicians. It really is a very low cost thing. And the way I see it as, if I was a person who is suffering from maybe food scarcity for the first time, and I walked by something like this, I might stop because I like that music, or I want to see what's going on, or my kid might want to say, I want to paint on this temporary wall a mural. So the first time I stop because I'm interested, but I see the line. The second time I stop and I kind of maybe have a cup of coffee. The third time I might have the courage to get on that line. And it's that kind of progressive opening for
Yes.
people that this experience is new. So
Yep.
I'll
Yep,
turn it over to you.
absolutely. Well, I love what you're up to. And I, you know, and I think that, you know, being able to co-create, you know, with the government on this, that, you know, who knows, maybe this thing turns into like, even when food scarcity isn't a problem, but a place for people to communally connect, right? And meet other people and support each other. But I do feel like this food scarcity will last for a while until we can really get through COVID and people can get back on their feet. So
Can I give a shout out? I had the privilege of meeting Marinella Mirpuri
yeah,
a few days ago, and she said something to me that had actually kept me up that night. I said, I think I got the best piece of advice I've ever gotten, and I don't know what to do with it yet. And I'm kind of making myself open to the universe. And that idea was think macro, not micro.
yep,
And again, she's a true visionary, and I
yeah,
see what she's accomplished. But that idea has made me think like maybe this is proof of concept kind of.
yeah, exactly.
But I would also be so open to any suggestions from your community as I go forward. Anyone in the Hera community who
Yep.
would say, oh, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? If they want to get in touch with me with an idea, I would be more than happy to receive it. So.
Yep. You know, and one of the projects I'm leading with Gil is Hera City for Marinella and
Yes.
building out the city. And I actually have a TV show I do once a month to hear the voices of people and what they want in the city as we move forward. So it's for the future of humanity. It's all genders, all nationalities, all religions with a strong feminine theme to it. Because there's every city in the world's been built by men. It's always about money and business. And we want this to be about humanity, the planet, and just living, because we were brought here to live, not to work. But somehow or another, we got so caught up in this whole money thing, right? So I would love for you to join. And, you know, some of the things that we think about too is that, you know, does it, you know, do parks have fruit trees and vegetable gardens that everybody have access to free food?
Absolutely.
I mean, how simple is something like that that can be done to provide for people as opposed to making it difficult for them to get food locally? So we have tons of things to talk about in regards to culture, you know, laws, society, you know, the environment, you know, the how we live. So I think, you know, women are so good at raising kids and family and taking care of community. Who better to design a city that's about, you know, healthy living for humanity and the planet? So I would love to have your voice on some of those conversations. So
Honored. I think what the foundation is doing overall, what they're doing with this, I mean, look, we know what's already happened with their society at this point.
exactly.
And the way I put it is there was a visionary who decided on the pyramids. You know,
Yep. And they're there.
They're there. So, you know, why not? We can only do our best in our short time on this planet. So I love that you're thinking that way too.
Yes, we're big thinkers. So Jacqui, we're here to support you. And when you're doing great things for, you know, for the planet and humanity, the universe will open up for you totally. It all will come to you. And I really applaud what you're doing. I'm very, very excited. So I want to, before I wrap up this interview, I'd like to ask you one more question.
Sure.
What would you tell your younger self?
I think what I'm saying is very common, and I really wish I have more confidence. You can do this. You got this. You know, don't be afraid to push forward. And I think when I was younger, but that comes from me. But I also think that as a woman, you're socialized to be silent. You know, And that is a very difficult thing to overcome. To understand your self-worth is one of the most difficult things for us to even wrap our heads around. So I wish I had known that. I think it's-
Brilliant. Well said. Well said.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank
And
you, Jackie, for this time. Yes, I really appreciate it.
it's been an honor. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Bye.